On November 17, 2024, the phone of Dr. Anja Bremer, chief forensic pathologist at Hamburg-Eppendorf University Hospital, rang at 3 in the morning with a call that woke her from sleep and would initiate one of the most bizarre investigations of her life. "Dr. Bremer, we have a case you need to look at," said Commissioner Thomas Meyer with a voice that expressed both confusion and concern. "A 59-year-old businessman from Hamburg has been found dead. His body shows signs of poisoning, but the substance is unknown to us. The strange thing is, he was perfectly healthy 3 weeks ago when he returned from Angola, where he got married. His young wife has disappeared without a trace." What Dr. Bremer would discover in the following hours was a medical mystery that would challenge the boundaries of modern forensics and uncover an international conspiracy targeting successful German businessmen. Harold Koester had been a man who enjoyed life to the fullest. At 59, he still radiated the energy and optimism of a man who had worked his way up from humble circumstances to become a successful import-export entrepreneur. His company, Koester Maschinenbau International, imported heavy industrial machinery from Germany to Africa and had made him a wealthy man. Harold was tall and powerfully built, with graying hair and lively blue eyes that often sparkled with a mischievous smile. His hands bore witness to years of hard work before he achieved prosperity. After his divorce 5 years ago, Harold had felt a deep loneliness that all his money and professional success couldn't fill. His marriage to Gabrielle had failed after 22 years, not out of hatred or betrayal, but from the creeping alienation of two people who had grown in different directions. His daughter Martina had largely broken off contact with him after the divorce, which pained Harold deeply. She accused him of only thinking about business and money and never really being there for the family. This loneliness made Harold susceptible to the attention of younger women, especially those from the African countries he did business with. He often idealized these encounters as exotic romances and overlooked cultural differences and possible conflicts of interest. His friends and business partners had often warned him that his generosity toward foreign women could be exploited, but Harold had dismissed these warnings as envy or excessive caution. What Harold didn't know: in the luxurious hotels and business districts of Luanda operated a highly organized network of women who specialized in wealthy foreign businessmen. These women were not the desperate gold diggers they were often taken for, but intelligent, educated, and coldly calculating. They studied their targets for months, learned their weaknesses, and developed tailored strategies to manipulate them emotionally and financially. Isabel Mendez was the queen of this network. At 32, she was a breathtakingly beautiful woman with flawless dark skin, long black hair, and eyes that seemed to change between brown and gold depending on the light. She spoke fluent Portuguese, English, and German, and claimed to work at Banco de Desenvolvimento de Angola as a senior employee. Her elegance and demeanor were so convincing that even experienced businessmen immediately trusted her. Behind this perfect facade, however, hid a woman who had grown up in the slums of Luanda and learned early that beauty and intelligence were her only weapons against poverty. She had systematically worked her way up from her modest circumstances, not through honest work, but through the targeted manipulation of wealthy men. Isabel was a master of psychological warfare who knew exactly when to be vulnerable, when to be passionate, and when to be distant to achieve her goals. The network Isabel headed included at least 12 other women, various corrupt officials, forged document dealers, and even a doctor willing to falsify medical reports. Their modus operandi was perfected. They identified wealthy foreign businessmen who regularly traveled to Angola, studied their habits and personal weaknesses, built emotional connections over months, and finally led them into marriages that gave them access to German bank accounts and assets. The first encounter between Harold and Isabel was no accident. She had studied him for months, tracked his hotel reservations, observed his business appointments, and analyzed his emotional patterns. When she finally accidentally met him at the Noble Hotel Presidente in Luanda, every detail of her personality and appearance was tailored to capture his attention and fulfill his longings. It was a humid February evening in Luanda when Harold Koester sat in the elegant hotel bar of the Presidente, reflecting on his business success. He had just closed the biggest contract of his career, 5 million euros for a complete production line to be delivered to Germany. The champagne bubbled in his glass, and for the first time in months, he felt truly satisfied. His company was flourishing, His financial future was secure. Only personal happiness was missing. It was precisely in this moment of self-satisfaction and vulnerability that Isabel Mendez entered the bar. She wore an elegant black dress that perfectly accentuated her figure without being intrusive. Her perfume, an expensive blend of sandalwood and jasmine, reached Harold before he saw her. As she sat at the bar, just 2 stools away from him, she ordered a white wine in perfect German. Harold was immediately fascinated. Here was a woman who was apparently educated, elegant, and independent, exactly the opposite of the cliches he had about African women. Her German was not only grammatically correct, but she spoke it with a slight accent that was exotic but not disturbing. "Excuse me," Harold said, turning to her, "but I can't help noticing that you speak German. Are you perhaps also a business traveler?" It was a harmless question, but Isabel had been waiting for it for months. "Actually, I work at the development bank here in Luanda," Isabel replied with a smile that seemed both warm and professional. "We often deal with German companies. And you? Let me guess. Import-export?" Harold was impressed by her assessment. "Good guess. Harold Koester, Maskenenbau International." He extended his hand, and her handshake was firm and confident. "Isabel Mendez," she replied. "Very pleased to meet you, Mr. Koester." What followed was a conversation that Harold experienced as the most fascinating of his recent years. Isabel spoke intelligently about international business, was knowledgeable about the German economy, and asked thoughtful questions about his work. She was interested but not pushy, charming but not flirtatious. This very restraint made her even more attractive in Harold's eyes. "You know," Isabel said after an hour of conversation, "it's rare to meet a German businessman who really understands what Africa has to offer. Most only see raw materials and cheap labor, but you speak about partnerships, about mutual respect." These words hit Harold right in the heart. Finally, someone who understood his business philosophy, who recognized that he was more than just an exploiter of African resources. "Isabel, that's exactly what I've been trying to convey for years. Africa is the future, and whoever doesn't understand that is missing the greatest opportunity of the 21st century." Isabel smiled. "It's good to meet a man who thinks outside the box." She looked at her watch. "Oh, it's already late. I should go home." "Wait," Harold said spontaneously. "Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow evening? I know a wonderful restaurant here in the city." Isabel hesitated for a moment, perfectly calculated to signal interest without desperation. "That would be very nice, Mr. Koester, but I should warn you, I'm very selective when it comes to men." Harold laughed. "Then it will be an interesting challenge for me." After this first evening, a romance began that Harold experienced as the most passionate of his life. Isabel was the perfect partner, intelligent enough for deep conversations, cultured enough for the best restaurants, but also down-to-earth enough to appreciate his stories about his modest origins. What Harold didn't know. Every moment of their time together was carefully staged by Isabel. She had obtained his hotel room number from a bribed employee and knew when he made phone calls or wrote business emails. She knew his habits, his food preferences, even his sleeping schedule. Isabel was not a woman in love. She was a predator studying her prey. If you believe that love knows no boundaries, then subscribe to this channel, because the most sophisticated predators study the longings of their victims just as intensively as hunters analyze the behavior of their prey. Harold Koester's story shows how deadly it can be when loneliness meets calculation. In the following weeks, Harold was seized by a passion he hadn't felt since his youth. Isabel seemed to be the answer to all his unspoken longings. She was educated enough to discuss complex economic relationships, but also vulnerable enough to awaken his protective instincts. When she told stories about her difficult childhood in the slums of Luanda, how she had freed herself from poverty through hard work and education, Harold saw in her a fighter who deserved his admiration. "You know, Harold," Isabel said one evening as they sat on the terrace of restaurant Local, watching the sunset over the Atlantic, "I never thought I would meet a man who understands my dreams. Most men here only see my appearance, but you really listen to me." Harold took her hand. "Isabel, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. Your strength, your intelligence, your beauty, everything about you fascinates me." What Harold experienced as spontaneous romance was, in truth, a carefully choreographed seduction. Isabel had already used these words with at least 6 other men. She knew exactly which emotional buttons to press to make Harold feel indispensable and desired. After 2 weeks of intensive courtship, Isabel made the first strategic move. She told Harold about a problem at her work. Allegedly, an important client of the bank was behind on payments, and she feared losing her job. "I don't know what to do," she said with tears in her eyes. "If I lose this position, I'll fall back into poverty. Everything I've worked so hard for would be for nothing." Harold was immediately ready to help. "How much do you need?" he asked without hesitation. "No, Harold, I can't ask that of you," Isabel objected, shaking her head. "We've only known each other for 2 weeks. It wouldn't be right." This apparent restraint only made Harold more determined. "Isabel, when someone I love is in trouble, it's natural that I help. How much do you need?" "It's 2,000 euros, Isabel whispered, lowering her gaze in shame. "I know it's a lot of money." For Harold, 2,000 euros was a small amount. He earned that in a few hours. "That's no problem," he said, kissing her hand. "I'll transfer the money to you tomorrow." Isabel embraced him with feigned gratitude. "You're saving my life, Harold. I will never forget this." What Harold didn't know, there was no client in arrears, no threatening job loss. Isabel had invented this story to test how far she could manipulate Harold. The 2,000 euros were just the beginning, a small test for much bigger plans. The next day, after Harold had transferred the money, Isabel was transformed. She was happier, more grateful, and more passionate than ever. She invited him to her home, a beautiful apartment in one of the better neighborhoods of Luanda, which had actually been financed by her previous lovers. "Harold, you've shown me what true love means," she said while serving him a traditional Angolan dinner. "In my culture, we believe that people who love each other so selflessly are destined for each other." These words planted a seed in Harold's mind, the first thought of a permanent connection, of something that went beyond a vacation romance. Isabel sensed this change in him and knew it was time for the next step. "Harold," she said a few days later, "I have to tell you something important. My family wants to meet you." Harold was surprised and pleased at the same time. "Your family? That's a big step." "That's how it is in Angola," Isabel explained. "When a woman introduces a man to her family, it means her intentions are serious. But Harold, you must understand, my family is very traditional. They will ask questions, test your intentions." "What kind of questions?" Harold asked. "They will want to know if you're ready to make a real commitment, whether you really love me or whether I'm just a vacation pleasure for you." Isabel looked deep into his eyes. "Are you ready for this kind of seriousness, Harold?" Harold felt his heart beat faster. "Isabel, I love you. If you're ready to get serious, then I am too." Isabel smiled and kissed him passionately. "Then I will arrange the meeting. But Harold, you must understand, in my culture, men show their serious intentions through gifts to the family. It's an old tradition." "What kind of gifts?" Harold asked. "Nothing extravagant," Isabel replied quickly. "Maybe 5,000 euros for my father, as a sign of respect, and some jewelry for my mother." Harold didn't hesitate for a moment. "That's no problem. Whatever is necessary to impress your family." In that moment, Isabel knew she had him. Harold was ready to invest not only money but also make emotional commitments. The hook was set. Now she just had to reel him in. The meeting with Isabel's family took place in a magnificent house in the upscale suburb of Miramar. Harold was impressed by the elegance of the property: white marble floors, antique furniture, and artworks that seemed to testify to the family's wealth. What he didn't know: the house belonged to another member of the network, a corrupt bank director who made it available for such stagings. Isabel's supposed father, Antonio Mendez, was a distinguished man around 60 who received Harold with the dignity of a patriarch. His wife, Maria, was an elegant woman who greeted Harold with the warmth of a concerned mother. Both spoke excellent German. Allegedly, they had lived in Germany for years when Antonio studied there. "Mr. Koester," Antonio said with a firm voice, "Isabel has told us a lot about you. You understand. As a father, I must ensure that the men who are interested in my daughter have honorable intentions." Harold respected this direct approach. "Mr. Mendez, I sincerely love your daughter. My intentions are completely honorable." Maria smiled warmly. "We sense that, Harold, but understand, Isabel has had bad experiences with men in the past. Men who made big promises and then disappeared. I would never do such a thing," Harold assured. "Isabel is an extraordinary woman, and I feel honored to be loved by her." Antonio nodded approvingly. "Those are the right words. But in our culture, Mr. Coaster, men show their seriousness not only through words, but through actions. What kind of actions? Harold asked. Traditionally, Maria explained, a man who asks for a woman's hand brings gifts for the family. It's a sign of respect and appreciation. Harold had already prepared the 5,000 euros for Antonio, but what surprised him was the extent of further expectations. Maria's modest jewelry wish turned out to be a necklace worth 8,000 euros. Isabel's supposed sister urgently needed money for her medical studies, another 3,000 euros. Her brother had financial difficulties with his business, another 5,000 euros. I understand this may seem like a lot, Antonio said when he noticed Harold's hesitation. But you must understand, Isabel is our jewel. We have invested our entire lives in her education and her future. When a man wants to marry her, he must show that he is ready to make the same investment. Harold calculated quickly. 21,000 euros total. It was a considerable amount, but not enough to ruin him, and the thought of losing Isabel was unbearable. That's completely understandable, Harold finally said. Family is the most important thing. I will provide the funds. Isabel's eyes filled with feigned tears of gratitude. Harold, you prove to me every day that you are the man I've been waiting for my whole life. What Harold didn't notice were the quick glances exchanged between the family members, glances of satisfaction that the plan was proceeding so smoothly. These people were not family, but business partners in an elaborate fraud. After the family meeting, Harold was officially accepted as Isabel's fiancé. The next weeks passed in a rush of romance and planning. Isabel constantly spoke about their common future, about plans to move to Germany, about the children they wanted to have. Harold, she said one evening, I have a dream. I dream that we build a business together. With your experience and my contacts here in Angola, we could create something great. What do you have in mind? Harold asked with interest. An import-export company that specializes in high-quality African artworks and crafts. There are so many talented artists here, but they have no access to European markets. We could be the bridge. The idea fascinated Harold. It sounded like a meaningful addition to his existing business, and the prospect of working with Isabel as a partner was enticing. How much startup capital would we need? He asked. Isabel had expected this question. I've already contacted some artists and made initial calculations. For the beginning, we would need about 50,000 euros for inventory, transportation costs, and marketing. 50,000 euros. Harold hesitated. That was significantly more than he had invested so far, but the business idea sounded reasonable, and the prospect of building a joint venture with Isabel was tempting. Let me think about it, he said. Of course, Isabel replied. But Harold, we shouldn't wait too long. Other investors are already interested in similar projects. If we want to be first, we have to act quickly. This gentle time pressure was part of Isabel's strategy. She knew that people under time pressure are more likely to make impulsive decisions and think less thoroughly about the consequences. A week later, Harold agreed. He transferred the 50,000 euros to a business account that Isabel had supposedly opened for their joint venture. What he didn't know, the account actually existed, but it was registered under the name of another network member, and the money had already been distributed to various accounts on the day of the transfer. You make me the happiest woman in the world, Isabel said when she saw the transfer confirmation. Now we can really start building our future. Harold felt great. He had not only found the woman of his dreams, but also a promising business opportunity. What could go wrong? The wedding took place only 6 weeks after their first encounter, a pace that Harold should later have recognized as the first warning sign. Isabel pushed for a quick ceremony, justifying it with her deep love and desire to finally move to Germany as a married woman. In Angola, she explained, it's normal for couples to marry quickly when they know they're destined for each other. Why should we waste time when we already know what we want? The ceremony took place in the magnificent Igreja da Sagrada Familia in Luanda, one of the most beautiful churches in the city. Isabel wore a breathtaking white dress that Harold had bought for 8,000 euros and looked like a princess. Over 100 guests were present, supposedly friends and relatives of the Mendez family, in reality mostly extras who had been paid for their attendance. Harold was overwhelmed by the splendor of the celebration and the apparent acceptance he found in Isabel's community. Everyone addressed him as brother or brother-in-law, and for the first time in years, he felt part of a large, loving family. The highlight of the ceremony was the moment when Isabel gave him her wedding vows. With tears in her eyes, she swore to be faithful to him for life, to love and honor him in good times and bad. Her words sounded so sincere, her emotions so real, that Harold was completely convinced he had found true love. "Harold," she whispered to him during the ceremony, "you have completely changed my life. I swear to you that I will do everything to make you happy." What Harold didn't know, Isabel had used these exact words at 2 other weddings. For her, the ceremony was not the beginning of a lifelong bond, but the completion of a successful business transaction. After the wedding, they spent a week-long honeymoon at a luxury resort on the Angolan coast. Isabel was the perfect bride, loving, passionate, and completely devoted to her new husband. She constantly spoke about her dreams of a life in Germany, about the children they wanted to have, about the years of happiness that lay ahead of them. "You know what I wish for most?" she said one evening as they walked along the beach at sunset. "I want us to buy a house in Hamburg where we can start our own family. I imagine our children growing up in your beautiful country, with the best educational opportunities and all the possibilities life offers." These words moved Harold to tears. Here was a woman who not only loved him but also appreciated his homeland and wanted to become part of his life. "Isabel, we will have all of that. I promise you I will do everything to fulfill your dreams." "Then we should start making plans," Harold replied. "As soon as your papers are ready, we'll fly to Hamburg and look for a nice house." But already during the honeymoon, Isabel began subtly setting the stage for her true plans. She spoke about the difficulties of having her Angolan qualifications recognized in Germany, about the high costs for translations and certifications of her documents. "Harold, I spoke with the German consulate today," she said on the 4th day of their honeymoon. "The visa processing will take longer than expected, and they demand additional proof of our income and financial means." "What kind of proof?" Harold asked. "They want to see that you as my husband are able to provide for me. They demand bank statements proving that you have at least 100,000 euros. Harold frowned. 100,000 euros? That's unusually much for a spouse visa. "I know," Isabel sighed. "But those are the regulations. They want to ensure I won't become a burden to the German state." She cuddled up to him. "I'm sorry it's so complicated. Maybe it was a mistake to marry a German." No, Harold quickly reassured her. "We'll manage this. I have the money. It's just currently distributed in various investments." Isabel smiled gratefully. "You're so good to me, Harold. I don't know what I would do without you." In truth, there were no such visa regulations, and Isabel had never spoken with the German consulate. It was another building block in her plan to get Harold to transfer larger sums to easily accessible accounts. On the last day of their honeymoon, Isabel presented Harold with another urgent matter. Her bank in Luanda allegedly had problems with international transfers, and she needed a German partner who could temporarily act as a trustee for her business transactions. "It's just a formality," she explained. "The bank needs a European account through which they can process certain transactions. You would only need to provide your account details and occasionally approve transfers." Harold hesitated. "Isabel, I'm not an expert in Angolan banking. Is this legal?" "Of course it's legal," Isabel assured. "After all, I work for the bank. It's just about circumventing bureaucratic hurdles. And Harold, we're married. What's mine is yours, and vice versa." This argument made sense to Harold. As a married couple, they shared everything, so it was only natural that they also cooperated in business transactions. He agreed, without suspecting that he had just made his bank account available for international money laundering. The return to Hamburg was marked by mixed feelings for Harold. On one hand, he was overjoyed to be married and starting a new phase of life. On the other hand, he already painfully missed Isabel. She had to stay in Angola until her visa papers were processed, which according to her statement would take at least 2 more months. Arriving in Hamburg, Harold could hardly wait to tell his daughter Martina about his wedding. The conversation took place in his office, as Martina refused to visit him at home. Her reaction was even worse than he had feared. "You did what?" Martina stared at her father in disbelief. "You married a woman you've known for 6 weeks? In Angola?" "Martina, I know it happened quickly, but sometimes you just know when you've met the right person." Harold defended his decision. "Dad, you're 59 years old, not 19, and this woman is 32. That's younger than I am." Martina's voice became sharper. "Don't you see how this looks? It's love, Martina. True love knows no age differences." Martina shook her head in disbelief. "Dad, Please tell me you at least didn't give her money." Harold was silent a moment too long. "I supported her family, yes. And we built a business together. That's completely normal." "How much money, Dad?" "That's none of your business, Martina. Isabel is my wife, and what happens between us is private." Martina stood up, her eyes full of disappointment. "Dad, you're being taken for a ride. This woman doesn't love you. She loves your money. And if you don't see that, you're more blinded than I thought." "That's enough, Martina. You don't know Isabel. You have no right to judge her." "Then good luck with that, Dad. But don't come running to me when you realize I was right." Martina left the office and slammed the door behind her. Harold's business partner, Jürgen Pohl, also expressed skepticism when Harold told him about his wedding. Jürgen and Harold had known each other for 15 years and had successfully completed several deals together. "Harold, old friend," Jürgen said during their monthly business dinner, "I don't want to hurt you, but what you're telling me sounds like a classic romance scam." "Jürgen, you know me. Do you really think I would be so naive? I think you're lonely and vulnerable, and this woman has exploited that. 6 weeks from first meeting to wedding, financial demands from her family, a business that immediately needs startup capital." Jürgen shook his head. "Those are all red flags, Harold. Isabel is not like other women. She's educated, independent, works at a bank. Have you verified that? Have you called her workplace? Have you checked her family?" Harold hesitated. "I trust my wife. Trust is good, but verification is better, especially with so much money." "Harold, you're being taken advantage of." But Harold didn't want to listen. Every doubt, every warning felt like an attack on his happiness. He had finally found love again, finally had hope for a shared future again. The criticism from his daughter and his business partner seemed to him like envy or misunderstanding. In the following weeks, Harold and Isabel talked daily. She always sounded more loving and longing, constantly talking about how much she missed him and how she could hardly wait to come to Germany. At the same time, however, the financial requests multiplied. "Harold, my darling," Isabel said during one of their evening phone calls, "I have bad news. The visa processing is being delayed further. The consulate demands additional documents, and the translations cost more than expected." "How much more?" Harold asked. 8,000 euros. "I know it's a lot, but without these papers, I can't come to you." Harold sighed. "Isabel, the money isn't the problem, but I don't understand why everything is so complicated and expensive. Bureaucracy, my beloved. You know that. The more money the officials see, the faster they work." Isabel's voice became softer. "Harold, I miss you so much. At night, I lie awake and dream of being in your arms again. This separation is the hardest time of my life." These emotional appeals weakened Harold's resistance. "Okay, I'll transfer the money tomorrow. But Isabel, this has to be the last time. I've already spent over 80,000 euros. "I know, Harold, and I'm ashamed of it. But as soon as I'm in Germany, I'll work hard and pay you back everything. You'll see, we'll have a happy life." The next day, Harold transferred the 8,000 euros. It was, as Isabel had promised, not the last time. 3 weeks later, Isabel called completely distraught. She was crying so hard that Harold could barely understand her at first. "Harold, something terrible has happened," she sobbed into the phone. "My father has been arrested." "Arrested? Why?" "False accusations. Business envy. You know that, in Africa, successful people are often wrongly accused." Isabel sounded desperate. "They claim he evaded taxes, but that's a lie. Someone has denounced him." Harold felt helpless. "What can we do? We need a lawyer, a good lawyer, and bail. Together 25,000 euros. Isabel cried even louder. "Harold, if my father goes to prison, it will break my mother. She has a weak heart. This could kill her." 25,000 euros. Harold swallowed hard. That was more than he had ever spent for a single emergency. "Isabel, that's a lot of money. Are we sure there's no other way? Do you think I would ask you for this if there were another way?" Isabel's voice became sharper. "This is my father, Harold, the man who accepted you into his family, who treated you like a son." The memory of Antonio's warm embrace, of the acceptance he had found in the Mendez family, overwhelmed Harold. "You're right. Family comes first. I'll transfer the money." "Harold, you're saving my father's life. I will never forget this. You're the best husband a woman could wish for." After this phone call, Harold sat alone in his office and added up the numbers. He had now spent a total of over 110,000 euros for Isabel and her family. It was a considerable amount, but not yet ruinous. And after all, It was about his marriage, his love, people who had become important to him. What Harold didn't know: there was no arrested father, no lawyer, no bail. The money had flowed directly to the network's account and was already being used for the next operation. 2 weeks later, the demands escalated again. Isabel called in the middle of the night, her voice marked by panic and desperation. "Harold, they've frozen our business account," she cried into the phone. "The police claim there are irregularities with our art transports." "What kind of irregularities?" Harold was wide awake. "They say some of our export papers are forged. That's impossible. I personally checked all the documents. Someone is trying to sabotage us." "What does this mean for our business?" "Everything is blocked. 50,000 euros, Harold. Our entire startup capital." Isabel sounded like she was about to collapse. "And the worst thing is, if we don't immediately raise replacement capital, we lose all our orders. Then our dream of a joint business is destroyed." "How much replacement capital?" 40,000 euros, to fulfill the most urgent obligations and apply for new export licenses. Harold felt cornered. 40,000 euros, in addition to the already spent 110,000, would significantly affect his reserves. "Isabel, I can't just keep transferring such amounts. My bank will ask questions." "Harold, don't you understand? If we don't act now, we lose everything. Our business, our future, our dreams." Isabel's voice became pleading. "I'll come to Germany and help you with repayment. We're a team, Harold. Teams support each other." Again, Harold let himself be convinced. The idea that their joint plans could fail was unbearable. He transferred the 40,000 euros and fervently hoped this would be the end of the financial crises. But it was only the beginning of the final phase of Isabel's plan. At the beginning of October, 4 months after their wedding, Isabel finally announced the long-awaited news. Her visa papers had been approved, and she would come to Hamburg at the end of the month. "Harold, I can hardly believe it," she called, overjoyed, into the phone. "Finally we can be together. Finally we can start our new life." Harold was overjoyed. Despite all the financial burdens, he had now spent over 150,000 euros. He looked forward to finally having his wife with him. He renovated his house, bought new furniture, and planned a romantic welcome at the airport. Isabel landed on October 28th at Hamburg Airport. Harold waited with a huge bouquet and a sign with her name. As she came through the arrivals hall, she was even more beautiful than he remembered. She wore an elegant red dress and looked like a model walking through the airport. "My beloved husband," she called, and fell into his arms. "Finally, we're reunited." The first days in Hamburg were like a second honeymoon. Isabel showed enthusiasm for Harold's house, for the city, for everything he showed her. She cooked traditional Angolan dishes for him, massaged his back in the evenings, and fulfilled his every wish. "Germany is even more beautiful than I imagined," she said as they walked hand in hand through Hamburg's Speicherstadt. "Here we can really be happy, Harold." But after about a week, Isabel's behavior began to change, subtly. She became more moody, critical, dissatisfied with her new environment. "The Germans are so cold," she complained. "Nobody greets me in the supermarket. The neighbors ignore me. This is so different from Angola, where people are warm-hearted and friendly." Harold tried to calm her. "It takes time to get used to it. Germans aren't cold, they're just more reserved." "Maybe you're right," Isabel sighed. "But I feel so lonely here. I don't know anyone except you." What Harold didn't notice was that Isabel used every free minute to explore his house, search through his documents, and study his habits. She photographed important documents with her phone, noted passwords he carelessly entered, and created a detailed profile of his finances and lifestyle. After 2 weeks, Isabel made a fateful suggestion. She wanted to prepare a traditional Angolan gratitude meal for him to show her appreciation for everything he had done for her. "In my culture," she explained, "a woman prepares a special meal for her husband when she is especially grateful to him. It's a very old ritual, full of love and respect." Harold was touched by this gesture. "That's very kind of you, Isabel. I just need a few special ingredients from the African store, herbs and spices that are hard to find here." She kissed him tenderly. "It will be the most delicious meal you've ever eaten." The next day, Isabel spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen. She prepared an elaborate feast: grilled meat, exotic sauces, various vegetable dishes, and a special tea that she described as an Angolan family recipe. "This tea is very important," she explained to Harold as she handed him a steaming cup. "It symbolizes the connection between husband and wife. We must drink it at the same time, as a sign of our eternal bond." Harold found the ritual romantic and exotic. The tea tasted unusual, bitter and spicy at the same time, with a strange aftertaste that he couldn't identify. "It tastes very intense," Harold remarked. "Those are the traditional herbs," Isabel explained. "In Angola, we say, the more intense the taste, the stronger the love." They drank the tea together, and Isabel watched Harold attentively as he emptied his cup. What he didn't know: his tea contained a carefully dosed mixture of plant poisons that Isabel had received from her accomplices, substances that worked slowly and were hard to detect. In the following days, Harold initially noticed only small changes in his condition. He felt more tired than usual, occasionally had headaches, and experienced a constant metallic taste in his mouth. "I think I'm getting sick," he told Isabel. "Maybe the flu or something." "Poor darling," Isabel replied with feigned concern. "The German weather is so cold and damp. In Angola, you would feel much better." She cared for him lovingly, brought him tea and soups, massaged his neck, and encouraged him to rest. What Harold didn't know: each of her healing treatments contained further small doses of the poison that slowly attacked his system. After a week, his condition deteriorated dramatically. Harold suffered from constant nausea, dizziness, and fainting spells. His skin began to take on a yellowish tone, and his eyes were often bloodshot. "Harold, you look terrible," Isabel said with perfectly acted concern. "I think you should see a doctor." "You're right," Harold groaned. "I feel like I'm dying." Isabel accompanied him to the family doctor, Dr. Weber, who had known Harold for years. The doctor was alarmed by Harold's appearance and immediately ordered extensive blood tests. "Mr. Koester, your values are extremely concerning," Dr. Weber said 2 days later. "Your liver and kidney function is severely impaired. This could indicate poisoning." "Poisoning?" Harold was shocked. "But with what? I only eat at home." "We need to find out. I'm referring you immediately to the hospital for further examination." Isabel gripped Harold's hand. "My poor Harold, I won't leave you alone for a second." In the hospital, Harold was admitted to the intensive care unit. The doctors were puzzled. His symptoms indicated systematic poisoning, but they couldn't identify the causative substance. The toxins Isabel had used were sophisticatedly chosen. They caused massive organ damage, but were undetectable with standard toxicology tests. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Koester," the attending physician told Isabel, "but your husband's condition is critical. His organs are failing systematically, and we can't find the cause." Isabel broke into feigned tears. "Please do everything you can. He is my whole life." While Harold fought for his life, Isabel used the time to implement her final plans. She had access to his bank accounts, knew his passwords, and had power of attorney that he had given her in a moment of love and trust. Systematically, she transferred money to accounts controlled by the network. She liquidated his investments, sold securities, and transferred funds abroad. In just 3 days, she plundered Harold's entire fortune, over 800,000 euros. On the 4th day, when the doctors told Isabel that Harold's condition had stabilized and he might possibly survive, she knew it was time to disappear. "I'm just going home quickly to get fresh clothes for Harold," she told the nurses. "I'll be back in 2 hours." Isabel never returned. She took the next flight to Luanda and disappeared without a trace from Harold's life, as suddenly as she had appeared. When Harold woke up 2 days later, he was still weak, but conscious. "Where is Isabel?" were his first words. The nurse looked at him with pity. "Mr. Koester, your wife hasn't been here for 3 days. We tried to reach her, but her phone is disconnected." Harold tried to call her, but her number was no longer assigned. He asked a friend to check for her at his house, but the house was empty. All her things were gone, as if she had never existed. The worst came when Harold checked his bank accounts. Everything was gone. His entire fortune, his savings, even the mortgage on his house had been increased. Isabel had not only poisoned him, she had financially ruined him. Dr. Anja Bremer entered Harold's hospital room with a mixture of professional curiosity and human compassion. As chief forensic pathologist, she had seen many bizarre cases, but Harold's story was extraordinary even by her standards. "Mr. Koester," she said, sitting down next to his bed, "I'm Dr. Bremer from the Institute of Forensic Medicine. The attending physicians have asked me to investigate your case." Harold, still weak and confused, tried to sit up. "Doctor, can you tell me what happened to me? Why did I get so sick?" "That's exactly what we want to find out," Dr. Bremer replied. "Your symptoms clearly indicate poisoning, but the standard tests show nothing. This means a very rare or sophisticatedly composed substance was used. She opened her laptop and showed Harold a list. I've already contacted colleagues in other European countries. In the last 2 years, there have been at least 8 similar cases, all involving wealthy middle-aged men who had married African women. Harold turned pale. You think that, Isabel? Mr. Coaster, I understand this is painful, but we must investigate all possibilities. Can you tell me exactly what happened in the days before your illness? Harold told her about the special meal, the traditional tea, Isabel's sudden disappearance. Dr. Bremer noted everything and asked detailed questions. The ritual with the tea is particularly interesting, she said. In 3 of the other cases, a similar ceremony was described. We believe that's the method by which the poison is administered. But what poison? Harold asked. That's the sophisticated thing about it. We suspect a combination of rare plant extracts, possibly from the African rainforest. These substances cause massive organ damage, but are practically untraceable because they break down quickly and aren't included in standard toxicology panels. Dr. Bremer closed her laptop. Mr. Coaster, I need your help. We want to stop this network before more people are harmed. Are you willing to cooperate with the investigators? Harold nodded weakly. If I can help others avoid the same fate, then yes. In the following weeks, Harold worked closely with an international investigation team. They traced Isabel's trail back to Angola and discovered a highly organized network spanning several African countries. The network had targeted at least 50 wealthy European men over the years. Some had only been financially robbed, others had been poisoned, and at least 10 had died. Isabel Mendez was not her real name. She was actually called Carmen Sebastián and was the leader of one of the most successful romance scam operations in Africa. The insidious thing about this organization, explained lead investigator Commissioner Meyer, is their professionalism. They study their victims for months, create psychological profiles, and develop tailored strategies. They use real cultural traditions as cover for their crimes. The family Harold had met consisted of professional actors. The magnificent house, the bank where Isabel supposedly worked, everything had been staged. Even the wedding ceremony had been a fake, performed by a corrupt official. Through international cooperation, several members of the network were finally arrested. Carmen Sebastián was arrested in Luanda as she tried to leave the country. During her search, authorities found documents revealing at least 20 more planned operations. The tragic thing is, Dr. Bremer told Harold, that your poisoning probably wasn't meant to be fatal. You were only supposed to get sick enough to give Isabel time to plunder your fortune, but the dose was too high, or your body reacted more strongly than expected. Harold had survived, but the physical and psychological scars would remain. His organs were permanently damaged. He would have to take medication for life, and his trust in other people was destroyed. The worst thing, Harold told Dr. Bremer, isn't even the money or the health. It's the feeling that everything was a lie. Every kiss, every loving gesture, every promise, none of it was real. 2 years after the arrest of Carmen Sebastián and her network, Harold Coaster sat in his small apartment in Hamburg. He had had to sell the house to pay at least part of his debts, and read a letter from the prosecutor's office. Carmen had been sentenced to 12 years in prison. 18 other members of the network had also received prison sentences. Of his original fortune, Harold had recovered only about 100,000 euros, money found in accounts the network hadn't yet emptied. It was enough to survive, but the wealthy businessman of old no longer existed. His health had stabilized, but he would never again be the strong, energetic man he once was. The poisons had left irreversible damage to his organs, and he was dependent on regular medical treatment. The most difficult thing, however, was the psychological healing. Harold had lost not only his fortune and health, but also his trust in humanity. Every friendly gesture, every smile from a stranger made him suspicious. He withdrew from his few remaining friends and lived in self-imposed isolation. To his surprise, Martina contacted him again. His daughter visited him regularly, although their relationship was still tense. "Dad," she said during one of her visits, "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." "You were right, Martina," Harold replied quietly. "You warned me, but I didn't want to listen. You were lonely and loved. That's nothing to be ashamed of. Carmen and her network were professionals. They deceived dozens of intelligent men." Harold nodded, but the self-reproach remained. How could he have been so blind? How had he overlooked all the warning signs? Dr. Bremer visited him occasionally, not just as a doctor, but as someone who had understood his story. "Mr. Koester," she said during one of their conversations, "you saved other people's lives. Through your testimony, we were able to break up the network and protect future victims." "That doesn't help me feel less stupid," Harold replied bitterly. "You weren't stupid. You were human. You had human needs for love and connection, and these were used against you. That makes you a victim, not a fool." Harold now worked as a volunteer for an organization that counseled romance scam victims. He told his story at prevention events and helped other victims deal with the psychological consequences. "Most people think romance scams only happen to naive or desperate people," he said during one of his talks to a group of business people. "But these criminals are experts in human psychology. They study their victims, exploit our longings and weaknesses. Intelligence doesn't protect against manipulation. Sometimes it even makes us better targets." On his 61st birthday, Harold received a letter from a woman in Munich who had decided to end her online relationship with a supposed businessman from Nigeria after his talk. "You saved my life," she wrote. "I was about to transfer my savings and fly to Lagos." Harold smiled for the first time in months. Maybe his pain hadn't been in vain. Maybe he could spare others what he had gone through. He would never again be the carefree, trusting man he once was. The scars, physical and emotional, would remain, but he had learned that surviving sometimes meant building something new from the ruins of one's own life. Harold Koester hadn't died, although Carmen Sebastianer Network might have planned that. He lived, breathed, and helped others. It wasn't the life he had imagined, but it was a life with meaning. And sometimes, in quiet moments, he could even hope again, not for romantic love or great wealth, but for the small human connections that made life worth living. He would be more careful, more suspicious, but he wouldn't stop living. The story of Harold Koester and Carmen Sebastian was over, but the warning it contained would live on, in the talks he gave, in the people he saved, and in the memory that true love takes time and never begins with immediate financial demands. If you or someone you know has become a victim of romance scams, you are not alone, and it's not your fault. Even the most intelligent people can become victims, because these criminals use our most human qualities against us, our need for love, connection, and trust. This doesn't make us weak, it makes us human. True love never asks for money, never isolates from family and friends, and never pressures into hasty decisions. Trust your gut instinct, and listen to the people close to you when they express concerns.